We landed at Anzio and approached the shore and what the Army would call LSTs, landing ship tanks. They're big barges with the big front end that would open up, and everybody would jump out and get in the water and fight to get to shore while we're being shot at by the Germans from the mountainside. And we jumped in and found that the water was waist high. I had a little hold of rifles over our heads and get to shore as far as possible. And once we got there, you start digging in, and we would dig in, and that's how I landed in Anzio. And it was not a pretty sight, but it worked. LST, landing ship tank. Once we got on shore, we dug in, and you couldn't get out to exercise, and we were in there for 5 months. I threw a snake out of my foxhole. I had a buddy next to me, and the Germans were firing from Rome 30 miles away with what they call Anzio Annie. Big shells were landing always around us, and finally one hit back of us, a little town called Nettuno, blew up the building, and then it started getting closer to us with the firing, so we ran to that town, and my buddy and I picked up a big plumbing pipe, probably 6-7 feet long. I said, let's take it back with us. At night it was dark, and firing was going on all around us. We got back to our camp because the firing now was in another direction. We laid that tube down to be able to talk to one another from his dugout to mine. We put it under the ground about 7 to 10 inches, and he'd yell out to me, Chuck, are you all right? And I'd yell out, Frank, are you all right? This went on for 5 months. I threw a snake out of the foxhole, and we lived like animals. And don't ask me how I went to the bathroom and how I changed or anything else, because it's embarrassing. But we did and survived, and God was in it. God had to be in it. Took care of it. I got tired after we were near 5 months, and one bright sunny morning, I told my buddy, I said, man, I'm cramped. My body is aching. I said, I got to get out of this hole before they start firing, mostly at night. They did at daytime too, but mostly at night. So I got out for a while, and I don't think I was more than 15 feet away from the hole in the ground. The plane came out from the sun. That's how they came. They come with the sun shining on it. If you look up ahead, you're looking at the sun. A plane would come, and one came and strafed alongside of me, and I dove back in the hole, and I stayed there. I never did that again. I didn't go out for exercise. I just clammed up in the hole. We were there 5 months, and for the 5 months, every night, they pulled out that Anzio Annie 30 miles away in Rome, a railroad car, out of the mountains so that we couldn't find it, our Allied troops, and they point that gun toward Anzio, where I was, and they start firing, and that thing just demolished any place it hit. And that went on for 5 months, so the ground was shaking all the time, and I was in charge. I was a sergeant. I was in charge of our squad, and we were handling 4.2 mortar shells, explosives. Came with driving a duck, and it was at nighttime. No lights. He couldn't have lights, but he knew where to come to our camp, and it was delivering these shells 2 in a box. And that Anzio Annie started firing and hitting our area, and he got so excited. All I heard him yell out, he yelled out loud, I'm out of here, and he jumped off the duck and ran away. And I had to jump on that duck. I never drove one. Those are like you see at Wisconsin Dells today. And I drove probably about maybe half mile toward the enemy lines. It was nighttime, and left it there with all those shells. I didn't want to leave it where our men were, and that helped our unit to be out of the danger zone. But one thing that happened was that in the foxhole next to mine, one of my men went out of his mind, and he had to be shipped back to New York. I got in the hospital while I was in Italy for about 2 days, and to get a little rest, but it's not like the hospitals out here, so get that out of your mind. Everything's very primitive. It's wartime, and it's just a brief reprieve, that's all, and get back in the hole in the ground and start all over again. We found out it was all over because all of a sudden you keep looking up in the air. There were always German planes coming to strafe us, bomb us, but now the American planes started coming over, and wiping out their airfields and everything else, and their soldiers that were dug in the mountainside. And the planes came more and more, whereas you'd see maybe 10 or 20 or 50, now you'd see a couple of hundred, and we knew things were changing in our favor. And it was a joy to see American warplanes coming over. Man, it was a sight to behold, because we knew that there's going to be a big change. We're going to get out of that hole in the ground and see what they wanted us to do next. And of course, the next thing that happened was that we got into Rome, and I was in charge of a squad, and led our squad into Rome. Was one of the first men to get into Rome, and they pulled me in. They said, "The Pope wants to see you." And I said, "The Pope?" I had nothing to do with the Pope, but they said he wants to see you. So they escorted me up in the Vatican City, and had to go way up to where the Pope was sitting on his throne. And he extended his hand, shook my hand. He said, I want to congratulate you and thank you for helping to liberate Rome," and gave me a rosary and thanked me. Unbelievable. The next thing that happened, that's just a little while of it to you. The Army doesn't let you alone. There's more work to be done, and our next big thing that we had to do was invade France, and I went in the southern France on the invasion, and we started marching across France, and that took some time, and that's where I ended up finally in Mannheim, Germany, when the war was coming to a close. But that was some time from the time I hit the shore of France till the time that the war ended. But the odd part is, when I got into Mannheim, Germany, the general that I started with in North Africa, General George Patton, was also in Mannheim, Germany, and he died there in a freak automobile accident with a broken neck. I started with him in North Africa many months before, ended up with him in Mannheim, Germany. He dies in Mannheim, and I go home. And what do you call that? It's all within God's will. The unit that I went overseas with, he came from the Chicago suburbs area. Few of them came from New York. The man that lost his mind was from New York. But most of my buddies on Anzio came from the Chicago suburbs area. And one of them, his name was George Fitz. And he lived out here just about 10 miles from where I live in Hinsdale. And we would meet every year at an appointed time for a bite to eat and reminisce. And then he finally died. I attended his funeral service. But the other men, they're scattered around in Chicago and Indiana, and I don't hear, once in a while I bump into one of them, but Italians became friends real fast. They embraced us, and were glad to see us, because we were liberating them in Rome, and they were very grateful. So when we got in there, we were showered with gifts, and of course there was the raw side too. I was a married man. I didn't fool around with the women, but there was a lot of things going on, strange things sexually that I'm not going to get into. But that's all part of war. From the hole in the ground, we were probably a mile and a half away from a town called Nettuno. And Anzio Annie was always firing on us from Rome to where we were. And sometimes they swung that gun of theirs, that railroad car gun, which was a huge cannon, a little bit over the other side, and then started knocking down the buildings in the town called Nettuno. And that's when my friend and I, later on, one night we had a retreat, run for our lives because they started firing on our area where we were living in the holes in the ground, and we ran to Nettuno, and that's where we grabbed the plumbing pipe and brought it back to us to be able to talk to one another through that pipe from his hole in the ground to my hole in the ground. We were told one time that a chaplain was going to come visit us. I said, I got to see that. I said, this place is a nut house. I said, no one that's sane wants to live here could come out here. I said, I got to see. I can't believe it until it happens. But it happened. A man called, and we were told beforehand he's going to call his name out by name at night, and we're going to have some signals, which we had. And he called out one night, said, I'm Chaplain McGee, and I want to come in. And he slid into our hole and talked to us and prayed with us. And I talked to him after the war.